These difficult circumstances, he went on, form her power of judgment and give her assurance and farsightedness, which will win the nation's heart. She is just the woman I needed, kind, good, loving, as German women are. She doesn't busy herself with intrigues. She has a sense of order and concerns herself only with me and her son. On the 5th headquarters were at Smorgoni. There was a member of the Vilna government and Count von Hogendorp, aide-de-camp to the emperor and governor of the town, awaited him. The emperor interviewed them and sent them off again at once. He then sent for me to take the dictation of his final orders. Smorgoni, December 5th, noon. The emperor leaves at 10 o'clock tonight. He is to be accompanied by 200 men from his guard. Beyond the Smorgoni Oshmiana relay station, as far as Oshmiana, by the infantry regiment that halts for the night 15 minutes from here. Orders to this effect to be given by General van Hogendorp. 150 good horses belonging to the guard to be sent to a point 1 league from Oshmiana. Staff officers from infantry regiment and the squadrons of lancers from the guard to be placed in relays between Smorgoni and Oshmiana. The Neapolitana, who are bivouacking tonight between Vilna and Oshmiana, to arrange for 100 horses to be at Miedniki and 100 at Rumziki. General van Hogendorp, to instruct the Duke of Bassano to wait upon the Emperor immediately at Smorgoni. The Emperor to start with the Duke of Vicenza in His Majesty's carriage. Monsieur Vonsovics in front, a footman behind. The Master of Horse to notify the King of Naples, the Viceroy, and the Marshals to be at headquarters at 7 o'clock. The Master of Horse to get from Chief of Staff an order to proceed to Paris with his secretary, Reyneval, his couriers and servants. The Emperor then repeated what he had already said in the morning, that the Prince of Schwarzenberg was on the move forward, that various regiments were arriving at Vilna and others on the Niemen, that the Vilna shops and even the Kovno shops were well supplied, and that the troopers, once they got a hold of food and clothing, would soon rejoin the ranks. There could be no doubt, in his opinion, that the retreat would be over when there was no more privation. Having tried on previous occasions to explain the real state of affairs to the Emperor and what I foresaw would come to pass, I listened this time without making any reply. Why don't you answer? What is your opinion then? I have grave doubts, sire, as to whether the Niemen will be the end of disorder, and as to whether the army will rally there. All the fresh troops ought to be sent to take up their position wherever your majesty thinks we can really stop, since contact with our disorganized forces will spread disorder amongst them, and thus lose us everything. So you think that Vilna ought to be evacuated? Unquestionably, sire, and as soon as possible. You make me laugh. The Russians are not in a fit state to proceed there now. And you know as well as I do that our stragglers don't give a F for the Cossacks. The Emperor was convinced that more supplies could be got together in 8 days at Vilna to resist the Russians than they would be able to collect in a month. In his mind's eye, he saw Poland arming all her peasants to drive away the Cossacks, the French army tripling in size because it had food and clothing, and because its reinforcements were now within reach, whereas the Russians were leaving theirs farther and farther behind. The Emperor, as at Moscow, refused to take into account the fact that the climate favored the Russians more than us. Already, he saw our cantonments, even our advanced posts, protected by the Poles, who were acclimatized and ready, with infantry as well as cavalry, to defend their country and their homes. He even saw our infantry, when once it had eaten its fill, less than 2 weeks hence, braving the cold and chasing away the Cossacks. The Emperor seemed to have no doubt about it all, and if I failed to alter his opinion by frankly expressing an opposite one, at least my doing so did not irritate him, since he discussed the situation for a long while with me. The Prince of Neuchatel was greatly upset at having to remain behind, although the Emperor, in accordance with his wishes, had made the King of Naples commander-in-chief. Berthier was consoled by the thought that he would be able to be of real service to the Emperor by remaining with the army, and that the presence of someone accustomed to being obeyed was necessary for the maintenance of good morale. His devotion and attachment to the emperor were heartfelt. He too saw how many difficulties there would be in rallying the army, not because of any lack of fresh troops. He had enough at his disposal, and the Guard still formed a satisfactory basis for reorganization, but because the emperor's departure, which otherwise he believed to be necessary, would provide a pretext for disorder, which might well complete the process of disorganization. At bottom, however, he was far from foreseeing what actually happened. Although the troops from the Divina and Belluno's men were going to pieces more every day, the King of Naples, the Viceroy, the Marshals, the Duke of Elchingen, Treviso, Istria, and Danzig, the Prince of Eckmühl, all of them, with the exception of the Duke of Belluno, who was in command of the rear guard, arrived in turn. They constituted a sort of council to which the emperor announced his determination to go to Paris. His manner was that of someone submitting a project for their opinion on it, and they were unanimous in urging him to go. We set out exactly 10 o'clock in the evening, December 5th, 1812. The emperor and I were in his sleeping coach. The gallant von Sowitz was on horseback riding beside the carriage, and Rustam also was mounted, along with the outriders Falgada and Omodru. One of them went ahead to order post horses at Ashmiana. Duroc and Count Lobau followed in one caleche, Baron Fane and Monsieur Constant in a second. The necessary preparations had been so carefully made, the secret so well kept, that no one had the least suspicion of what was happening. With the exception of the Grand Marshal and Baron Fane, even those who set out on this journey did not know of it until 7:30, when the marshals were notified. The emperor reached Oshmiana about midnight. Loison's division and a detachment of the Neapolitan cavalry had taken up their position there during the afternoon. It was freezing hard. The troops were full of confidence in the belief that they were covered by the main army. Consequently, the outposts were badly placed and, in addition, badly manned. The main body of the division was quartered in the town, where everyone shut himself indoors to escape the cold, which was extreme. Shortly before the emperor's arrival, a Russian commanding some irregular troops had taken advantage of this confidence, novelties to us. Only the emperor had been well served throughout the retreat. That is to say, he had always had white bread, linen, his chambertin, good oil, beef or mutton, rice and beans or lentils, his favorite vegetables. The Grand Marshal and Monsieur Lobau rejoined us here. I do not remember that I ever suffered so much from cold as on the journey from Vilna to Kovno. The thermometer had gone to 20 below. Although the emperor was dressed in thick wool and covered with a good rug, with his legs in fur boots, and then in a bag made of a bear's skin, yet he complained of the cold to such an extent that I had to cover him with half my own bearskin rug. Breath froze on the lips. The formed small icicles under the nose, on the eyebrows, and round the eyelids. All the clothwork of the carriage, and particularly the hood, where our breath rose, was frozen hard and white. When we reached Kovno, the emperor was shivering as with the ague. At Rusizki, we found a regiment on the line of march. On the way from Vilna to Kovno, the emperor again raised the problem whether he should take, as he had first intended, the direct route to Königsberg. Would it be prudent, with the possibility that some incident would lead to his recognition, to cross the whole breadth of Prussia? We had a commandment in every town, but apart from the regiments on the line of march, we had no troops. On the other hand, there was so much snow that we might be seriously delayed if we followed a less frequented road on which there were no post horses. These considerations made us hesitate to take the road through the Duchy of Warsaw, which from other points of view was safer. If we were not to be delayed, however, it was necessary to make up our minds so that we could order the horses. After weighing again the advantages and disadvantages of each arrangement, we came to a decision. I say we, because the emperor refused to judge the question and insisted that I alone should decide, which I confessed seemed to me a very heavy responsibility and worried me considerably. I took a chance and sent word forward along to the road to Königsberg, but left myself free to change direction at Mariampol if I heard that the roads through the duchy were passable.